We're live? Awesome. All right, it's 5 o'clock. Today is Tuesday, April 12th, 2022. We're going to get this board meeting started and called to order. Let's begin by indicating who's here.
Clark Nelson.
Nicole McDermott.
Connie Burgess.
Julie Jackson.
Jerry Bodden. Rich Nye.
Dave Garrett.
Karen Winder. Chris Nguyen is en route. She will join us shortly. We have two administration reports this evening. We're going to start with the monthly construction and capital update. We'll turn the time over to Don and Justin.
Okay, thank you. Oh, just forward with.
This is cool. I have no
Okay, let's get rolling.
That's interesting.
On the security projects, not much has changed in the fact that we still have two projects that will start construction this summer once materials are here. That is Rolling Meadows and Hardbixon, and then the other ones are in design, and so that's kind of the same as it's been since the last month or so. There we go, sorry. Again, Hardbixon, we're waiting basically on materials to arrive. There's reviewing shop drawing submittals. Same thing with Rolling Meadows, so those will get started here end of May and first part of June. Westlake, we have all kinds of soil opportunities, and it's not going vertical yet, but we are pouring footings and other necessary things in the ground. So excavation, utilities going in, says reinforcing for forms, placement. Had a pour the first day of this month, and we've had a couple pours since then, even with the weather. So they're continuing to make progress, even with the inclement weather. Here's some of those photos you can see as they're digging out the earth there, forming them up to the right, compacting rebar, and then placing concrete inside there. Lots of forms that have to go in, lots of concrete that has to go in the ground.
How much does it put us back with what happened with the parking lot, underneath the parking lot?
There were no time delays. It was caught early enough, and they just, actually, they looked at us and they said, how likely is it to go past? I said, it's a soil issue. We have to remediate it. It'll go through. They said, okay, we'll just get going on it then, because they didn't want to suffer a time delay.
So that is Westlake. Any questions about Westlake before we jump to Skyline?
We're just having technical
That's fine.
difficulties with the plugs up here. Okay. Is it on? Okay, sorry.
Okay.
Continue.
Okay, we'll jump into Skyline then. We've got some very exciting photos to show you here in a minute, but the new pool has been filled and circulated. They're circulating the water, which I'll show you here in a minute. The old pool was drained, and they started to sample, and good news, they did not find asbestos in the pool, which means it'll go down much quicker when it's time for demolition of the existing pool. Mechanical equipment, boilers, and other things are starting to move and move air. Gymnasium floor, the wood floor is in the building, not placed, because it has to, they have to test the concrete to make sure there's not too much humidity in the concrete before they lay the floor, and let the wood acclimate to the weather or to the temperature in the building. We've started work on the synthetics field, which will be the soccer lacrosse field next to the tennis courts. That started. You'll see some tiling going on in the bathrooms, and some perimeter fence work, which I'm excited to show you. So here's one of the team. This is one of the team rooms on the north side of the new athletic building. During the season, football, during the season, basketball, baseball, lacrosse, well, not baseball, but lacrosse and other sports that need team lockers. You see that there, tile work on the floor. The nice wood doors are going in. Some of the tennis courts, the photo to the left, the tennis courts are to your right. There you see kind of in the distant there, and they're prepping the field. This is that synthetic field that I mentioned, and they're grading that and getting that prepared. The photo to the right is up against the athletic building looking due east, and there's some concrete that will go along here and fencing and just getting that prepped and ready to go. These are 3 photos that we just barely added. They're not in your presentation. We just added these yesterday because I felt like they were very important to show. The top 2, excuse me, there's a glare on that. The bottom, or the one to the left, is our west property line looking north. So our neighbors to the west of Skyline, you can see that they're putting in the block there at the base, and then we'll have concrete panels. They'll tilt up in place and set on those for the wall that will be separate us, the Granite School District property, and the neighbors to the west. And the parking lot, yes, the parking lot's over here and some other things. The 2 photos, the one to the right, upper corner, and then in the middle and lower, are both the north property line. The top one there is looking west, and the bottom one is looking east. And you can see the new black fence posts are there. The retaining walls are in, and you can kind of see how we're going to start to really clean up that property line and leave it in a much better shape than it was before. So exciting progress there. Here's the pool. I think maybe on the last board presentation you saw that, but the pool is filled and they're actually circulating the water and making sure all the systems are working. They've infilled. If you see in the upper, in the middle of the slide there, that upper panel was open before. That's how they were coming and going in and out of there. They've infilled that now, and so they can really get moving in, keeping the temperature where it needs to be and moving things along. Exciting to see that. Wrestling room to the left, you can see hardwood flooring is in there, and then a sidewalk tennis courts to the right there. You can see some new concrete, just barely placed before this photo was taken. And then as we, before we jump into Cyprus, any questions on the Skyline progress or presentation there?
Can you go back to the numbers for a second?
Yeah, absolutely. We can talk about that. Oh, sorry. So you
change.
Yep. You have in your packet, there was 2 change orders, 1 for Westlake, 2 for Cyprus, and 2 for Skyline in your packet that you saw. Was there a specific question?
Yeah, how did the numbers change?
On those change orders, you mean?
Like where are they reflected here? That's
yes.
what I wanted to know too.
Yep.
Gotcha. Well, as far as where, I mean, we had the change order for the strobes. That would be in the first. That would be in phase 3. Phase 2, which is the athletic building right there at the bottom, where it says athletics. So that one is where that, I think it was $87,000 one was that for the strobes, and the other one was a combination of changes that were design errors and omissions that were also allocated to the athletic building. Actually, and some of those I think carried over into the academics building right there, number 4, phase 4 at the bottom. So really you would see phase 2 and the phase 4 where those errors and omissions you see right there at the bottom there, where those occurred this month. Does that answer the question?
This might be a dumb question, but it's especially like those strobes, reading about that. How did that get overlooked? That seems, if that was a fire safety thing, who was it that overlooked that, and why was it left out?
There's probably a lot of people that can own up to that, but as we pointed out in the letter, the drawings are reviewed by the State Fire Office, right? And so they're one party that did not catch it at first, and then caught it as their inspector was walking the project and realized these individual rooms have to have strobes in there. Went back and realized that they didn't catch it in their plan review, but it doesn't negate the fact that it's still required as part of the ongoing process. These rooms are relatively new in the greater society that we're doing these small, self-contained restrooms, and so it's catching people a little bit off guard. Not trying to make an excuse, but they're different than in the past when you just had a restroom with stalls that didn't go all the way up and you only needed one in there, not one per room. Essentially, we're creating one little room, self-contained, and it has everything in there, fire strobe, all of that.
And that, the great example that many of you are familiar with are the faculty restrooms. historically, they were adjacent to larger rooms that had audible fire alarms and strobes, and they just accompanied the space. Now, the state fire marshal office and others are saying, well, they're separate, so, because there's a door, so now put those devices in. And so it's fire code with interpretation. Some things are black and white, some things are light gray, some things are charcoal gray, and their interpretation is now, you know what, the adjacency for the strobe is not close enough. So we want it in there because if there's someone that has a hearing disability and they can't hear the audible horn outside, we want them to at least now see the strobe.
So I understand change orders have to be as far as, I mean, we are in the midst of high inflation costs and shortages and supply and demand issues, and I get the change orders that are relative to that. I think this particular change order regarding Skyline, I've just circled a few things. Structural engineer realized they missed the calculations. The electrical engineer realized while they were reviewing, they didn't have the correct size of wire and breakers. The architect overlooked wall tile behind the custodial sinks. Structural engineers miscoordinating their work. This is all in the same change order regarding several different things. So my question is kind of where, I mean, we are basically, we take those tax dollars seriously. And so it's harder for me as a board member to look at this and just be okay that things are overlooked or missed. And so who fronts the cost of those mistakes?
So the category of error and omission is probably the hardest category for owners to wrap their heads around and to be, seldom are you happy with, but content with the answer at the end of the day. So one way to think about this is a challenge that buildings are created by imperfect people using imperfect materials. And that is a direct quote from our superintendent. He mentioned it 6 months ago, and I thought it was a succinct way to put the challenges that we work with. And it is backed by case law in where no one's expecting a designer to be perfect. And so they will miss details in a project. And the question is who pays for those misses, right? That's the big conundrum. So you could think of it that if they didn't miss it in the original bid package, had it been included in the original bid package, we would have been paying for it, right? It would have been another series of costs that we add up. So in many respects, we're just catching up to perfection. If the bid package would have been perfect on day one, it would have included these costs. And today, yep, we caught up to it, they found it, and we're going to put that in there. I will tell you that there is a caveat, and we work through this with the designers as things come up. It will never be as cheap because there's always a change order markup, and we actually contractually control that change order markup. We then go at a point in time to meet with the designers and say, well, here are the change orders that were related to a miss. And let's say there's a 5 or 10% additional cost over what it would have been in bid day. We approach the architect and we say, we think you're responsible for that increase. And when we go about it in that manner, we've been very successful as a district getting to compensate for that amount, right? That additional change order cost, not the full amount, because if it would have been there on big day, we would have been picking that up anyway. But that additional profit that they bring to us. Very seldom are owners successful in getting designers to pay for the full cost of the change order element. The rare circumstances are if the error or omission was so great that that section of the building or the building in its entirety had to be torn out, removed, and replaced. That shows more of a level of I don't want to use the term negligence, Julie, but yes, they miss their level of care so much that they should be paying for that. So when it comes to these error and omissions that are a lower level that we're just perfecting the document might be a term that an architect would use, that we would have paid for that perfection up front, but they're willing to work with us on those additional costs. So you saw in your memorandum that we gave to you that there were sections where we're going to go have conversations with the architects or the designers, because they're architects and engineers, to bring us whole by taking in that markup, the change order markup. Not the change order in its totality, because we wouldn't win that case in these small circumstances. They weren't so glaring an error that they caused us great harm.
So when the contractors and we sign with someone, is there usually some kind of difference that they expect to have this kind of thing happen?
So yes, and you hear us talk about our contingency funds that are out there, right? We always plan for, we like to keep it under 2%. We've been fairly successful at the 1.5% range when it comes to change orders. So those are contingencies that are built into total project budget that are out there to handle the various change orders. Because as far as we know, there's yet to be a perfect building, right? Now, you get very close to perfect buildings when you've built it 4, 5, 6, 10 times, right? You know a building so well. So repeat buildings are super effective, and we like to get to repeat buildings. These are two very large, very complex high schools, their first time out. And so we have expectations of challenges, be it on the site, be it in the plans and their completeness or not. So we have taken that into account in the background, but when you create a document, you don't always say, oh, and heck, without asking permission, contractor, here's another 2%. You never do that, because they'll use the 2% when maybe you only needed to use the 1%. And so we're controlling that through change orders and other means through allowances and et cetera.
So as Cyprus is similar, are these things not in the Cyprus that you now will include in that?
Yes, so right now,
order?
Skyline's ahead of Cyprus in some respects, right? And so we're now adding those into the plan and vetting those through the contractor, right? Because we're catching them live. They'll most likely come with a change order that we'll work through before we present it to the board. Then there's a point in time in the construction where it's going to flip, and Cyprus will be encountering omissions or differences first. And so then you'll see kind of the methodology flip where we experience it at Cyprus first, and then we understand it better and can bring it to the Cyprus team and make the corrections and changes that way.
We actually just had one like that at Cyprus, because in some areas they already are ahead of Skyline, like the academic building. They're already starting to do footings, and there was some pipe placed in the ground that was the wrong type of pipe, and it was caught, realized that I was specified the right way. They put the wrong one in. That was on them, their cost. They had to go back and replace that. But it made a point that when we get to that point at Skyline, make it very clear to the contractor, let's do it once, put the right pipe in, right? So those are types of things that Don mentioned that we are learning, and it'll go both ways. So there's things we're learning from Cyprus that will go to Skyline and vice versa.
And to be clear, there will be unknowns that are so site-specific that it won't apply. It'll apply to one school and the other. Soil conditions or et cetera. Those are great examples. Or a utility connection that's in that the community has that isn't where they said it was. Things of that nature are unique to each school site that we deal with.
So Connie raised the contingency question.
Mm-hmm.
Your letter to the superintendent says that the funds for these additional expenses will come from bond funding. Why are they coming from bond funding rather than being accounted for in the contingency?
Yeah.
Or at least as I see here on this slide, it's being accounted for in an errors and omissions line item, which according to your letter then flows up to bond funding.
So even contingency is bond funding.
I agree, but it's already been approved.
Right. So we have We have a contract change right now that we're working through with the contractor that would allow designer errors and omissions to come from that contingency. Right now, it's only contractor errors and omissions, right? So right now, we have in the planned spend a contingency that's for error and omission funds. This contract was written at a time where, and this is a DFCM, Division of Facility Construction and Maintenance at the state. We took their base document, changed it to Granite District and said, this is our contract. At the time this contract was written, it was pre-COVID conditions and pre-et cetera. At that point in time, they were writing contracts that were super tight and didn't allow for that, and the term is contractor's contingency, to be used for architect error and omission. In COVID times, they've swapped that and they've opened it up more broadly. And so we're taking some language from them and making that play as well. And the reason that they have done that is things are very volatile on the market now and changes are happening more rapidly than before. Normally you would just have your owner's contingency pot of money out there and the two would never intermingle. And because of the volatility in the market, everybody's looking at it saying you're going to need both pots of money to figure this out. So when Brian Ipsen has his planned spend out there, we have a contingency. And the only way to use that contingency that's not baked into the guaranteed maximum price, the $174 million we always talk about, we have other contingency out there. To access that, we have to change order it. If we change our contract language and the contractor is willing to allow owner uses, those errors and omissions, then it's baked into the 174. Until that contract language is changed, it's not. And that's just a reflection on the bidding climate and market volatilities that we're at. When this contract was conceived 5 years ago, nobody was writing a contract that way.
The contract that you're referring to is the Hughes
Correct.
contract.
Yes.
And I'm still confused by your answer. So the Hughes contract is what it is. It's for $174 million. That's what this board has approved.
Yes.
Correct?
Yes.
That contract has a contingency.
Yes.
But these change orders that we're being asked to approve tonight do not fall under that contingency.
That is correct.
Is that what you're saying?
Yes, they are
And
not.
why do they
contract.
not?
Because the contract was not written to allow errors and omissions from the architect to be part of that fund.
Okay, do we have a separate contingency in our budget for errors and omissions that relate to architectural and design contracts?
Yes, we have in the plan spend another set of contingencies, yes.
And what is the overall budgeted amount for architectural and engineering? Is that what gets us from 174 to 205 million?
It's part of all of that FF&E calculation. You remember I mentioned contingencies in that list of 5 or 6 items several months ago. It's all part of that. I don't have that number committed to memory, but it's all rolled up in that additional roughly 10% above and beyond construction cost.
The Hughes contract cost.
Above the Hughes contract cost, yes. And so we're not, while we're over contract amount, we're not over budget with a change order, right? Because we carry contingency. Everybody does. You can't be so irresponsible as to think the minute you sign a contract, the price is never going to change.
I think we all understand that, and we appreciate the clarification. I think what I'm trying to understand is why are we documenting in our document trail that the funds for these additional expenses are to come from bond funding? I get that the budgets ultimately were developed based on bond funding money. But if we have contingencies in place for architectural and engineering change orders, why are we not documenting that those changes, those additional expenses will come from the contingency that relates to that architectural and engineering contract?
We can change the terminology should you like. At the end of the day, this was all approved as the bond / pay-as-you-go model, right? And so we've just kept that language in from 5 years ago. If you want us to change and identify this as an owner contingency, we can change that language, certainly, if that's more clear to the board.
Yeah, I just think, I mean, I don't know that the board has a desire one way or the other. We just want it to be clear. to us as to where the funding is coming from versus where it maybe is
Yeah.
not.
Yeah. And we can make that switch. This has just been the historic language.
Rich has something he wants to say, I can tell.
Well, it's to that point, two moving parts, right? If we clarify some of that language, but also understanding that we're working the contract to allow us that latitude under the contractor's approved amount to be able to pull these contingencies, right? From the 174 rather than other bond funds. And so we can provide an update on that as soon as that language is agreed upon in that new contract. So it is our effort to continue to work with the contractor, get the language that we need to be able to complete the project in a way that maximizes some efficiencies. So that will also be, in terms of update on timeline on that, I know we're in process, but
At exactly 5:01, we just got the next round of language from our attorney, so I don't know where it's at today.
I know we're in process, but this is 5:01, we got another round, so.
All right, let's move along.
And by the way, I think another important point of clarification, in the contractor's contingency, if they don't use it all, it comes back to us as a deductive change order at the end of the day. So a lot of this accounting will build on itself until you close out the project, and all of these deductions then come back in as balancing change orders, right? So that it's a game of patience at a point in time that you have to wait for the project to close out to balance some of these books back into the owner's favor, because there are contingencies or allowances that are not used during the project, and you don't know that until closeout. And so there are some negatives that come back in, negative deductions that come back in towards the end of a project. So it's a long, hard game to think through, but knowing that there's some monies that do return at the end of the project as well, based upon the contingencies you carry.
I'm just going to ask the question, should we really expect that to happen on this Skyline project?
It's all about that crazy market condition right now, and I don't know what it is in the next 2 years is scary. What it is after that, I hope that it improves.
But that said, we still do track them, right? Because it's still our money. And so where it goes and where it's assigned is still our responsibility. So we are tracking it. You're right.
I hear you. I just think we
Sure.
need to be careful managing expectations.
Thank you, that's exactly.
It may not be a big return. There's most likely some sort of return, but it's not going to be earth-shattering.
Yeah, we're seeing conditions we've never seen before, and we appreciate your efforts. I know it's frustrating, but we're in times uncharted waters. You know, whether the return's large or small, we appreciate your tracking.
But we need to be careful not to blame everything on that. There's
No,
issues
I'm
with
not
this
saying that
there's
at
issues
all.
with this project, and I think we need to be careful not to just sweep it all under the rug that there's unprecedented times. There are. We need to recognize that as well, but that's not the only issue.
No, and I think the process we're going through is making sure that we are holding everyone accountable. But we're seeing things we haven't seen before, so.
And you do note that we do track them by category. I mean, an error and omission is an error and omission. It's not a market condition, and we're telling everybody straight up, it's an E&O. Yep. Or there's an unknown soil condition, or. So we've categorized it because we track it that way internally. We don't just say, oh, market condition and move on. Justin's team, you have a group of professionals here that they've done this for decades and decades, and their job is to be the most frugal and cost-effective that they can be. And when you get a change order that's come through this group, they've looked at it inside out, upside down, and 3 ways to Sunday, and I guarantee you it's smaller than the day it came in. These guys are, I mean, outside of the very bright jacket today, these guys are amazing. They are completely competent in what they're doing. And so, yes, it shows up on your plate and it's somewhat unexpected, but it's been thoroughly vetted by everybody involved in the process. They're very cost-conscious individuals.
And I will say, we do have a spreadsheet. We track everything on all of our projects, big or small projects. And typically, the biggest offender of change orders is the district itself, right? We decide we need to do this, or working with the principal, this needs to change in a small, whatever the project is. And typically, we are the biggest offender. That's not the case for these two projects, right? Because of all kinds of elements. Well, yes, yet.
Cyprus,
Cyprus, good times.
Thank
Moving
you.
on, thank you.
I'll just read this, you can read this as well, but gymnasium slabs are being poured. The pictures here in a second will kind of really illustrate this. We're forming up and framing for tilt walls that you'll see they're laying down. We'll show you that. Some of the footings for the pool are being installed and excavation's ongoing. The Geo Wells out to the south of the building, there's 2 welling, drilling crews there now, and so they're on site, which is good. The retaining wall along Cordero Drive is being worked on and installed. So let's jump in here and you can kind of see some of the photos. Anything, go ahead.
No, what we're trying to do, we realized after last meeting that when Justin and I are looking at this site, we know where everything's at, and we're like, okay, that's area J and column this and that and the other. We thought we'd label it here. Now, a lot of what you're seeing when we show you the commons or the gym or et cetera, sometimes these are permanent pieces of concrete that are actually the floor of the building, and sometimes they're what we call the casting slabs. We're going to put something down to pour the walls on to tilt it up, and then that casting slab gets demolished and removed afterwards. And so just as you're looking at things, understand we have a lot of concrete going down here, and sometimes it's in a temporary position. Somebody's going to look at it and say, did you do a concrete parking lot? No, it's our casting beds. And they're put in a special way to make sure that the cranes can move around them and get from A to B. So understand, you'll see this change. I'm going to say quarterly, you'll see a change on the casting beds.
And those casting beds are some of the nicest concrete you'll see because they've got to be smooth if they are the face of the walls that we're going to pour on top and stand up. So they look very nice. So you see, and Don helped us with some graphics here, certain areas, the academic area, the gym area, the commons area, what you're looking at in this photograph. Again, some labeling to kind of help you as you're looking from an aerial view there. The stage, you can see the gymnasium, or excuse me, the auditorium is really starting to take shape. You can start to see the steps that step down to the stage, and you can see the orchestra pit there starting to really come into shape.
And one of these days we'll get you the images of the casting beds that are putting up the walls for the stage. These are the tallest walls we have. They're roughly 74 feet. And so at the base, they're the thickest walls that we pour. And they're pretty darn impressive from a building perspective that we're gonna have I think it's a 300-ton crane on site that will actually pick these things up and stand them up like we would an erector set. These guys are scary good when they do this. And so we'll try and document some of that. It impresses the heck out of you when you see it.
And I did skip over that. One of the things that we wanted to show is in their orchestra, the contractor's orchestra, right, they've got to figure out not only where we have to build, but where are the in-between spaces that we can actually do the building and move a crane back and forth. So they're laying all this out with that in mind, that they've got to move cranes in and out to stand these walls up because you can't reach over all the way and stand up a wall. So they're thinking through all of this, which is pretty cool, at least in our world, it's pretty cool. Again, some looking here at the site, that top picture, we're looking southeast-ish, if you will. The homes to the west there, and that will be our future tennis courts there on that corner there. Parking as well. Right next to parking, where you see that road that goes up there, that's going to be the main entrance into the site. So that'll be really cool. If you have not been out there and to see all the homes going in there, but also to see the sidewalks, and our site is defined now with sidewalk, and you can see the grade changes. You can see how much higher it's going to sit up than Cordero Drive. It's going to be great sitting up on top there, looking back to the valley. It'll be really, really, really gorgeous. And then we had the 2 change orders we talked about for Cyprus as well.
The stormwater detention liner is an example of refining that VE that came in. Remember, we took a big deduction, said, hey, we can save you $700,000. This is an addition of the liner. The engineers, after they looked at it, said, you know what? We can't have that much water seeping next to our retaining wall. So instead of saving $700,000, we saved $610,000. Still a great savings, but protecting that retaining wall is the right thing to do.
Next.
And I think that's all our presentation.
That's it, yeah. Those are the big projects right now.
Are you going to touch on the energy?
Yes, that is using Ben's computer, I have to switch presentations here. So the next thing that we wanted to do was continue on with construction and talk a little bit about sustainability, et cetera. And even Justin mentioned the Cyprus geo-well drilling. That's an energy management and sustainability tactic that we're using. And we'll talk a little more about it here. Understand that Skyline's soil was not conducive to geothermal wells, where a lot of our buildings are and a lot of our buildings aren't. So it's always location dependent on what the engineers find. So again, what we want to do is gain an understanding of what Granite District is currently implementing to reduce energy consumption and to use clean energy. We also want you to gain an understanding of what we may wish to address or change or modify should we want to continue a pathway forward to cleaner and cleaner energy each year and decade. So we have some policies in place. So we have an energy management subgroup that works with Justin, and our goals are to monitor the consumption of energy and water and to develop plans to produce economical and efficient use of these resources. So there, you've adopted stuff already as a board, and we work to do that. And we'll work with anybody from, you know, our maintenance folks, our design engineers, to principals, teachers, et cetera. As we always like to say, there's never a small unit heater under somebody's desk that would escape our attention when it comes to energy consumption. So we do even go to those cute little heaters and talk to them about, did you need to leave it on all night, or we noticed it's never switched off, those kind of discussions. And so we have policy and practice, and the Granite Board has given the administration the charge to pursue clean energy options on a case-by-case basis and evaluate and develop as fiscally prudent. And again, that discussion of geothermal wells is a great example. You can't make a blanket, just go do this everywhere. No, it is very much case by case, because sometimes Mother Nature is not cooperative with us. So energy management and conservation's responsibilities, we provide support to principals and staff to improve their classroom comfort levels. And so a lot of that is making sure that as we time our heating and air conditioning, it comes on at the right time to make it comfortable, but it's not running all day so as to continue to consume energy. We work with utility providers to get our billing accuracy and payments correct. The largest single event that kills us every month is we have a condition where the highest peak gets charged a certain amount of money, no matter what we do. So if we flip the air conditioner on the hottest day instead of the second hottest day, at the first of the month, it costs us money. So we're scheduling and looking at calendars and trying to figure out when to have our peak energy demand flip on. Because unlike residential consumers, everybody that's not at home gets a peak energy demand charge. Because what they're really saying is their system experiences everybody kicking on electricity at a point in time, and they have to buy peak energy to meet that. So we're scheduling to be kind of sort of off peak as much as we can with everybody else. So we're always kind of fiddling with those type of things. We're trying to educate employees to improve energy conservation. Again, we restrict the highs and low thermostat settings in buildings. I'm sorry, if you like it 66, you're not going to get it at 66 degrees. You're going to get it at 69 to 74 degrees. That's where we run the banding. We implement green building practices throughout the district when appropriate. Those can be, as we mentioned, geothermal in nature, PV in nature, energy conserving in nature, buy better windows, save energy. It could also be finding a local source of a product and not having it shipped across the entire country, because that delivery produces fossil fuel energy and et cetera. So we try and buy locally if we can. And so we're always striving to produce that comfortable learning environment while maximizing those energy dollars as well. So you're aware on some of our recent construction, South Kearns and Olean Walker as sister schools, we were able to implement a PV panel layout, ground source heating and cooling at both schools. This code compliant insulation, again, really thick on the roofing, for example, energy efficient windows, LED lighting, and lighting controls. So those are some of the techniques that we use to be as efficient and effective as possible. So you see in this building that the vast majority of the building has PV panels laid out. This produces kind of a net neutral on the year consumption. We produce a lot in the summer when school's not in session, and it spins the meter backwards. But during the school year, we're running a negative, but it's okay. We're producing as much as we can on these buildings, and their location allowed for that to happen, and the payback allowed for that to happen. In the lower right-hand corner, you see that geothermal well at Olean Walker. Most wells we drill are straight up and down, and they go down hundreds of feet, 200-300 feet. These are only down at about 15 feet, and they look like a giant slinky laid on its side. We could not go down to depth here because we're in a shallow ground aquifer that includes drinking water and irrigation water, and they don't want us to mess with that. We can't mess with the hydrology there. So again, the PV panels use solar energy to produce electricity. It's scaled upon what our approximate consumption is for the calendar year, not the school year. The electrical production does not necessarily meet the daily needs, and the school is obviously connected to utility power for night use, other peak uses. We have not implemented a battery storage option because we can't get the return on investment to work out for us, right? We can produce and then store for the nighttime use, but by the time you implement that battery storage, and by the time you take into cost of, we also look at total cost of ownership, right? There's maintenance involved with everything we do. There are annual costs involved, and we just can't get that return on investment to come back. Geothermal wells, these are really cool. We bury pipes in the earth. We run fluid to them. The earth stays at a more constant temperature. So in the winter, we're actually pulling heat from the earth to temper it instead of just grabbing the air. So if the air's at 10 degrees and I need it to get to 80 to heat the school, that's a 70-degree delta. Well, the earth is going to be closer to 50 some odd degrees. Oh, that really slimmed down the delta that I have to come up with, so it's more energy efficient. I don't have to put as much mechanical heat into it. And the inverse is true in the summer. Trying to reject heat into a 110-degree Utah summer day is pretty energy intensive. And so when we can use geothermal, we love to do that. The simple old adage, use less power. Frugality is important. As a matter of fact, it's probably the most important thing that we can do. And so it's often easier to save than it is to produce. So when we re-roof a school, as an example, we're adding code compliant or code compliant plus insulation. It saves a lot of money. Same when we can afford to do window replacements, et cetera. Just the amount of solar heat gain that we get in the summer or cold seeping in really changes how a building consumes. We switch to LED lighting. We use lighting control such as occupancy sensors, timers, dimmers. Now technology in newer schools allows us to use daylight harvesting sensors. So we'll only power the lights to the degree you need to keep the room lit. So if it's a bright daylight day, we don't use as much lighting to do that. So we're always trying to do that. And here is a great example of comparing a couple of buildings. Walker Elementary in the teal blue, and Stansbury, which was the addition was done and the remodel was done in 2012, 2013. So they're a decade apart. Look at the difference in energy consumption on how we build today versus a decade ago. Our peaks are I mean, we're using maybe 60% during our biggest peaks, and every other off-peak we're using substantially less than that. So designing and having the luxury of a new building really allows us to control our energy usage. And again, same with natural gas. It's easier to conserve than it is to produce. It very much is. And this graphic really, I think, brings that home, even to buildings where we've done our darndest a decade ago, we're able to do much more today. We're also pursuing many grants. The grants have been pretty slim, I'd say, for the last decade since the ARPA funding in 2010 through 2012 disappeared. With the Build Back Better legislation that passed in 2021, we anticipate more clean energy grant opportunities. We're finally starting to see EPA and others have established some better rules and are starting to want to roll out grant opportunities in the fall. Transportation, for example, is going to investigate electric bus options. They're attending a conference late this summer, and the vast majority of this national bus conference is about what these grants are going to be able to do and who they're available to and when they're available. So we're tracking those type of things quite often. And everybody's going to have an opportunity, and there's going to be these great headlines about releases, and then there's the devil in the details, right? The news article takes a paragraph, and the grant application takes a 2-3 inch binder. And so we'll figure out how we're eligible and how it comes to us as the releases come out. We also do different analytics, and we look at what it would take, for example, to purchase clean electrical power through our utility provider. We found that if you wanted to do a clean switch to the commercial term is blue sky energy, it's roughly a 7.4% premium above what we pay today. And Rocky Mountain Power is looking at having 90+% clean energy in that fund or in their entire portfolio by 2050. And so at a point in time, everybody will end up transitioning to that just because of who our provider is and what they're doing. If we wanted to purchase PV panels to get us off kind of on that Olene Walker model, relative net neutral, we do about $229 million in financing, which when you look at your M&O expenditures and the financing of that, it's about exactly what the purchase is from the utility provider. So we have some sixes going in there. We've analyzed different things such as energy purchase contracts, energy savings purchase contracts, energy savings companies that come out and do this. And they're a financing mechanism. They'll come in and say, well, we'll only use we will save you money and then we will reinvest those savings. Okay, it's a financing mechanism, right? And our bond rating and financing costs are less than theirs. And so at the end of the day, ESCOs and service providers really are not matching what Dave Garrett, through his management of the books, has allowed us to get in a bond rating. So for our district, it's not the smartest thing to do to look at those. The most important thing that we really need to look for is grants to help offset that initial cost and create that fiscal opportunity and that return on investment. Right now, without the grants, we're not well positioned to jump in head first on this, and so the grants will really help us offset those. So we're looking forward to what the Build Back Better plan offers this year.
Don, so when you talk about this $229 million for on-site PV panels, is that talking about like district-wide panels enough to?
That would be district-wide, and we actually don't have enough rooftop to make it happen. Taylorsville High School, for example, I think they have about 4.5 acres of roof, and we need almost 6 acres of PV panels to run Taylorsville. So we'd have to figure some other off-site-y type stuff. When you get into our secondary schools, yeah, it's a challenge to look at that as a self-sufficient rooftop PV model.
Yeah.
And then the other concerns you have is that some of our roofs are not designed to carry the weight of PV panels. And so we'd have to re-roof to allow or. So again, the ballpark of 229, it's there. It gives an impression of where we need to be, but it certainly isn't inclusive. Again, when we say case by case, we mean it, because there are a lot of other additional upcharges, and sometimes our old electrical systems in our buildings really need a little bit of work on the main panels before we could even look at bringing in the energy produced by PV. So we caution this, it's in the ballpark, but it certainly isn't the true cost.
That was a lot of information. Thank you.
Yes.
We appreciate this. We love the monthly updates, by the way, and I think the greater community enjoys those as well. So thanks to you guys for putting it together, Ben, for putting it on the website. Julie.
I also really appreciate understanding more about this clean energy and what our options are, because you know, it's just really, everything's about a cost-benefit analysis, right? And there are lots of great ideas out there, but understanding the costs is really, really crucial. And I don't think I've really had a good handle on that. So I appreciate being educated by this today.
All right, thank you.
Rick, I graciously left you 10 minutes of the 60 allotted.
There you go. So Rick Anthony's coming up. We're going to move on to our second administration report, a sex education curriculum approval process. He's just going to, has a few slides to walk us through on the timeline of how this all occurs.
There you go.
This is only 4 pages.
Thanks, Board President, Board, Superintendent, Administration. In your consent agenda for this month was health curriculum materials. Health curriculum typically is sex ed that's approved in health classes in secondary and trickles into maturation in elementary. The items in there weren't maturation related, they were health class related sex ed materials. This slide deck is essentially just reminding you or orienting you to the process that happens with these. So sex ed materials is really the only kind of curricular materials that hit state law. And I've just, in the slide deck here, I've put that in there. In that law, it requires that the LEA have a committee that reviews these and that the board approves them. There's an element as well that asks the board to review data in the county. So I want to say, I think there's a slide in here, I want to say in November we had that in your information packet as well. That data is every other year. So every other year you'll see that come through and they ask us to give you data on teen pregnancy, child sexual abuse, sexually transmitted diseases, etc. And that was November that came through. The other half of the law is the sex ed committee, and that reads, it must be composed of at least as many parents as school employees. And in this latest round, we managed to get quite a few parents. We had 17 parents participate and 10 employees. The way we have it set up is they meet at least twice yearly, typically fall and spring. They go through materials and content that has been requested. So you could have a year where we don't bring this to you because there were no requests for materials. In that committee, the materials must be approved by a 2/3 majority before they go out to public comment. And then they're going to public, after public comment, they come to you like they have in the consent agenda. Both have given you both the materials and the comments. This year we only had one comment, and historically that's less than usual. So just outlining that timeline for you, in this latest round, last spring there were some requests for materials. In the fall, or sorry, in that spring they started to review those requests. So around this time last year, in the fall they went through the vote and approval. We opened up for public comment in February and ran that for probably 6 weeks. Last month we shared those same materials, links to those materials with you, and then in the consent agenda last week we gave you the one comment that was submitted. And here in April we have that on the consent agenda. Easy, made it in 10 minutes. Questions that you have?
I don't have a question. I am looking at the committee membership, and I'm actually really happy to see the parents outnumber employees.
Yeah.
Because when it comes to curriculum and having the parent involvement piece, as I read through the names, I was like, okay, this is really, really good to to have their perspective, because it's, after all, it's their kids.
Yeah.
So to have parent voice outweigh employee voice on this, I think is a really good ratio. So I just wanted to compliment the committee for having more parents.
Compliments to Noel Converse and Curriculum and Instruction. They did a really good job of proactively looking at these materials, vetting these materials, listening to what parents had to say, recruiting. Believe it or not, there weren't 17 parents just dying to participate. So there was some recruiting involved in the process as well.
That speaks to my question, is how did you form the committee? Was it recruiting, and did you have a number that you needed to land on, or how did that play out? If I missed that, I apologize.
Yep, so by law, there has to be at least as many parents as employees, so, we're gonna meet that minimum. But transparently, there was some recruiting and working through parents who are involved via community councils, via other interactions with curriculum and instruction, that sort of thing. Some of the parents enjoy participating and continue with the committee every year. So next time we go through this cycle, we can put up the parent names from last time to this time to get a sense of how much turnover there is in that group. And it's not enormous, but there is turnover.
Any other questions? Pretty straightforward. Thank you, Rick.
Thank you.
All right, so that concludes our early portion of the meeting, our 2 admin reports. Thanks again to everybody for putting that information together for us. It was very informative and allowing us to kind of barrage you with questions at the same time. So we appreciate that. We're gonna recess until 7 o'clock and reconvene for our main board meeting then.